Let my grandson eat that? Do you even read labels? She said it before she took her coat off. Before she said hello. Before she even looked at me. It was 7:42 in the morning. I was still in my pajama pants. My son, Theo, had oatmeal on his chin and a wooden spoon in his fist, and he was perfectly happy. And my mother-in-law was standing in my kitchen holding up a container of baby puffs like it was evidence in a courtroom. My name is Hazel Merritt. I've been married to my husband for 4 years. His mother, Lorraine, has had a key to our house since before the wedding, handed over by my husband before I was ever asked, tucked into her palm at Sunday dinner like it was nothing, like it was her right. For the first 2 years, I told myself it was fine. She was helpful, sometimes. She knew where the spare towels were. She brought soup when Theo had his first cold. I tried to be grateful. But gratitude has a shelf life when someone keeps taking more than they were given. It started small. She'd water my plants and leave them by the wrong window. She'd fold my laundry and reorganize my drawers while she was at it. Not folding, reorganizing. Her system replacing mine like mine had never existed. Once she rearranged the entire lower cabinet in the kitchen because, she said, it made more sense this way. I came home and couldn't find anything. I stood in my own kitchen opening cabinet doors like a stranger. I told my husband. He laughed a little. That's just how she is, he said. She means well. That phrase lived in our house like a third roommate. Every time I brought something up, it showed up first. She means well. That's just how she is. What I didn't know then was that meaning well was a costume. Something she wore in front of my husband so she'd never have to answer for what she was actually doing. I found out the hard way what she was actually doing. It was a Tuesday. Theo was 14 months old. I had a freelance deadline and a pediatric follow-up appointment at noon, and I'd been up since 5 because Theo had a rough night. My mother-in-law came over, unannounced, as always, and I heard her key in the door while I was on a work call in the back room. I muted myself and listened. I heard her walking around, heard her in the kitchen, heard her sigh. That specific sigh she had, the one that sounded like a compressed opinion. When I came out after my call, she was sitting at the table with Theo on her lap and her phone out, typing. She smiled when she saw me. Just catching up with your husband, she said. That night, I found out what she'd been catching up about. My husband mentioned, casually, that his mother was worried Theo wasn't getting enough variety in his diet. That I might be over-relying on packaged foods. I had made Theo roasted sweet potato, pureed chicken, and fresh banana that day. The baby puffs were a snack. One snack. Out of the whole day. But she hadn't seen the rest of the day. She'd seen 10 minutes of it. She'd photographed what she wanted and sent it without context. And my husband was nodding along like she'd submitted a report. That was the night something shifted in me. Not broke. Shifted. Like a bone that has been pressed wrong for too long finally making a sound. I started paying attention differently. Not to what she said, to what she was building. Because over the next several months, I watched her work. She didn't criticize me directly, mostly. She was too smart for that. She'd say things to my husband with me sitting right there. She'd ask questions in front of his family that sounded like concern and landed like accusations. At Easter, in front of his parents and his sister and her husband, she said softly, almost to herself, I just hope Theo's sleeping better. Hazel mentioned she was exhausted. I worry about babies in homes where the parents are running on empty. I hadn't mentioned anything to her. I had never said I was exhausted. I didn't even know what to do with the lie of it. How do you correct something, said that softly, in that tone, to that many people, without looking defensive, without looking like exactly what she was painting you as? You can't. That's the thing. That's what she understood, and I hadn't yet. She wasn't gossiping. She was drafting a narrative. Patient, incremental, sympathetic sounding. The kind of story where she was the worried grandmother and I was the question mark in the middle. The worst night was in February. My husband's whole family for his father's birthday. His parents, his sister Bev and her husband, 2 aunts, an uncle, 4 cousins. I had spent 3 days on it. The apartment was clean in a way it never usually was. I made a real meal. I was proud of it, quietly, the way you are when you've worked hard at something and it shows. Halfway through dinner, his mother set down her fork, reached into her bag, pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward the table. I'd been keeping a little record, she said in the gentlest voice she had. Because I care so much about Theo, and I just feel like sometimes when we love people we have to be brave enough to say the hard thing. Photos. A cluttered counter. Dishes in the sink. From one specific Tuesday when I'd been sick, one day, one morning. A photo of Theo in what she'd apparently decided was not enough clothing, though it was 70 degrees. A photo of the baby monitor, implying somehow that it was a problem. The table went quiet. My husband's aunt looked at me with that particular pity that is somehow worse than hostility. My husband said nothing. His mother said, "I think we all want what's best for this baby. I just wonder if Hazel might benefit from a little more support." And then she looked at me. With her kind eyes and her concerned expression, I didn't cry. I wanted to. Something was pressing behind my eyes and in my throat, but I swallowed it down and I said, "Excuse me." And I walked to the bathroom and I locked the door and I stood in front of the mirror until my hands stopped shaking. She wanted a reaction. I was not going to give her one. That night, after everyone left, my husband said, "She's just worried. Maybe we've been a little scattered lately." Scattered. I looked at him for a long moment. He looked tired and confused and like he genuinely didn't understand what had just happened at his own dinner table. That was the moment I understood the full picture. This wasn't about dishes or diet or sleep schedules. She had been constructing a case, not a dramatic one, not the kind that announces itself, a quiet one. The kind built from accumulated whispers. The kind designed to make the people around you start seeing you through her lens instead of their own. I knew what I needed to do, and I knew I needed to do it carefully. The next morning, I bought 2 small cameras, not hidden. I put them in plain sight in the living room and the kitchen, the kind people use for home security. I installed them myself. I set up a shared note on my phone and started logging. Date, time, what was said, who was present. Not obsessively, just consistently. The way you document anything important. I started bringing Theo to all his pediatric checkups alone and asking detailed questions, writing the answers down, keeping the summaries. I asked his pediatrician if she would be willing to write a brief letter confirming his health and development. She was surprised, but she agreed. I kept the apartment the same way I always had. Normal, lived in, functional. A family home. And then I called her. Warm voice. No edge. I said I'd been thinking about how I hadn't made enough space for her to be involved, that it would mean a lot to me if she came by on Thursday and we could have coffee, just the 2 of us. A chance to really talk. She paused just long enough for me to know she was trying to figure out my angle. Then she said yes. Thursday, 9 in the morning. I heard her car in the driveway. Then I heard her footsteps on the porch. Then the small sound of a key being inserted. Then nothing. The smart lock beeped once. The handle didn't turn. A pause. 4 seconds, maybe 5. Then the doorbell. I opened the door, smiling. "Oh, I updated the lock. Come in." She stepped inside and her eyes went immediately to the cameras. I watched her see them. I watched her recalibrate. I poured coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. I asked about her week. She was careful, measured, waiting. "I've been thinking about the family dinner," I said. "About your concerns for Theo." "I only want what's best for him," she said. "I know," I said. "So I put together some things I thought you'd want to see." I opened the folder on the table. Pediatric summaries. Weight and height percentiles. Developmental milestone notes. A letter from the pediatrician. A brief note from my own therapist. Not because I'd been in crisis, but because I'd been attending sessions voluntarily, as I had since before I was even pregnant, and there was nothing in the world wrong with that, and I wanted it documented. She looked at the folder without touching it. "And since we've been keeping records," I said, and I reached for the remote. The television came on. The footage was clear and time-stamped. Her coming in on a Tuesday morning while I was on a work call, opening the refrigerator, photographing the counter, opening the cabinet under the sink. I still don't know what she was looking for there, typing on her phone, smiling at Theo before she left like she'd just dropped in for a visit. She didn't move for a moment. "You recorded me," she said finally. Not a question. Something harder than a question. Something harder than a question. "In my home?" I said. "Yes, I was helping. I'm always just trying to." "I know what you were trying to do," I said. Not loud, not angry. Just clear. I slid one more thing across the table. A screenshot I'd found 3 weeks earlier. My husband had left his laptop open and I'd seen it by accident. Not snooping, just there, an email draft in his mother's name addressed to a family attorney. The subject line said, "Concerns regarding grandchild welfare, daughter-in-law." Her name on it, my name in the body. It had never been sent. Just saved. She looked at it. The silence in that kitchen was the loudest thing I've ever been in the middle of. "I was protecting him," she said quietly. "From me," I said. She didn't answer. My husband came through the front door at that moment. I had asked him to come home mid-morning, had told him only that I needed him there, that it was important. He walked into a room that felt like the end of something. He saw the television, the footage still on the screen. His mother sitting across from me, not composed for the first time since I'd met her. The folder on the table, the screenshot. He stood there for a long time. "Mom," he said finally. Just her name. Like a question he didn't know how to finish. She started to answer. Started the familiar rotation. Concerned grandmother only wanting what's best. Families should support each other. He looked at the screen. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. "You were going to contact a lawyer," he said. "About Hazel." "I was exploring options," she said. "For what?" His voice was flat. I had never heard it like that with her. She didn't have an answer that held. He pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. Not next to her, next to me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time in my own home, the specific steadiness of not being alone in it. "I think you should leave," he said. She stood slowly, straightened her jacket, looked at me one last time with an expression I couldn't entirely read. It wasn't quite anger, wasn't quite grief, was somewhere in between, the face of someone whose plan has been taken apart, piece by piece in the room they thought they understood. Before she reached the door, I said, "I need the key back." She stopped. "I've changed the locks, so it won't work anyway, but I'd like it back." She reached into her bag, placed it on the entry table without looking at me. The door closed. The apartment was quiet. Theo was still asleep in his room. The coffee I'd made was still on the table, barely touched. My husband sat next to me and didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "How long has this been going on?" "Since before Theo was born," I said. He closed his eyes. There's a particular pain in that moment, when the person you needed to see it finally sees it and you realize how long you waited and how much it cost you to wait. But there's something else in it too. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something like the first day of a different kind of marriage. One where I was no longer managing his relationship with his mother by absorbing what it cost me. One where he finally understood what he'd been asking me to absorb. We had hard conversations after that, real ones, not the kind that skirt the actual thing. He called his mother. He told her that visits needed to be scheduled and agreed to by both of us. That communication about our home and our son went through both of us. That she did not have access to our space or our child unilaterally. She said he was turning against her. He said he was choosing his family. It took him too long to get there. I've made peace with that mostly. He wasn't cruel, he was conflict avoidant, and she had spent 4 decades learning exactly how to use that against him. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. What I know is this: I spent 2 years managing an intrusion quietly, and it cost me more than I like to think about. The weight of being documented in your own home. Of smiling at family dinners while someone dismantled your credibility in real time. Of lying awake, running through every visit, looking for the moment you could have said something different. Something that would have changed it. Nothing would have changed it. That's what I know now. She was not going to stop because I handled myself better. She was going to stop when she lost access, and she lost access when I took it back. Theo is 2.5 now. He's healthy. He eats sweet potatoes and baby puffs and all kinds of things. He sleeps well. He is a perfectly ordinary, happy, chaotic, wonderful little person. His grandmother sees him on scheduled visits. She is polite to me now in the careful way of someone who knows what you know about them. My husband stands next to me at those visits in the way he didn't used to. My home is mine again. Not cleaner than before. Not quieter. Just mine. There's something I've thought about a lot since all of this happened. Not the confrontation, not the footage, Not even the moment my husband finally sat down next to me instead of across from me. What I keep coming back to is the version of myself who spent 2 years absorbing it quietly and calling that patience. I thought I was being the bigger person. What I was actually doing was making room for someone to keep going. That's not a criticism of myself. I understand why I did it. I was new to the family. I wanted to be liked. I didn't want to be the daughter-in-law who caused problems, so I became the daughter-in-law who swallowed them instead. And Lorraine understood that about me before I understood it about myself. That's what made her effective. She didn't push until she knew I wouldn't push back. The thing about people who operate the way she did is that they rely on your discomfort with conflict more than they rely on their own strength. She wasn't powerful. She was just willing to keep going as long as no one stopped her. The moment I stopped absorbing and started documenting. The moment I traded silence for evidence, the whole structure she'd built started to show its cracks. It wasn't made of anything solid. It was made of the space I kept giving it. What I learned about courage is that it doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like buying 2 cameras and installing them yourself on a Tuesday afternoon. Sometimes it looks like asking a pediatrician for a letter. Not because you need to prove anything to yourself, but because you understand now that the arena has rules and you're finally going to play by them. Real intelligence, the kind that actually changes your life, isn't about having the cleverest comeback in the room. It's about understanding the game being played before it's over. And my husband, I want to be honest about him, because it would be easy to make him a villain in this, and he wasn't. He was someone who had spent 40 years learning that the path of least resistance with his mother was agreement, and it cost him things he didn't even know he was losing until he saw it on a television screen in his own living room. What he did when he finally saw it was the thing that mattered. He sat down. He chose. That's not nothing. It came later than it should have, and we've talked about that, really talked about it, but the choice itself was real. Theo won't remember any of this. He'll grow up knowing his grandmother at a careful distance, on scheduled visits, in a version of the relationship I get to have some say in now. That's not the worst outcome. That's actually okay. What I want, if any part of this lands with someone who needs it, the people who erode you quietly are counting on you to doubt yourself loud. The moment you stop doubting and start watching, the balance shifts. You don't have to be angry to be effective. You don't have to be cruel to be clear. You just have to decide that your home, your child, your name are worth the discomfort of standing up for them. I decided that on a Tuesday in February. It took me too long. But I decided.